Education policy is strained by housing policy, meaning that redlining concentrates students of color in high poverty areas, putting them in lower quality schools compared to their white peers.
Who goes to which school and who gets preferential enrollment at the best public school. Policies that assign children to schools based on where they live.
Redlining continues to push a person who's in a certain tax bracket to one community.
CARES Act is a bill passed by the Trump administration, signed into law on March 27, 2020.
The CARES Act contained $13.5 billion to go out to the states for the purposes of rendering aid to K through 12.
As a result of the CARES Act, Baltimore County Public Schools received $96.6 million in funding as of 2021. This amount cannot support a county with approximately 854,000 inhabitants and a 9.05% poverty rate.
You know, the problem generally in the country is that if we have a property tax-based system of financing the schools, the wealthier counties and jurisdictions are going to be able to spend more per capita per student than the less affluent counties or jurisdictions.
The CARES Act funding dedicated to education has been inadequately divided and has limited student resources in majority-minority schools.
This is bigger than just the students, of course. You have to look at their community and their families, and of course that impacts the students. And when you look at the big picture, here within Montgomery County, Maryland, but nationwide, COVID has impacted communities of color much more severely than white.
When the pandemic first started, March of 2020, and schools were closed down, a lot of our kids in underserved communities didn't have access to laptops, didn't have access to Wi-Fi and technology.
20,000 students in Baltimore don't have access to a computer at home. These problems have shown to have detrimental effects on students when it comes to testing and grades in general.
I think by not getting them the resources that they need impacts the opportunity gap, which connects to lack of opportunity, and that is manifested both in terms of physical needs, having the masks, having internet connection, having the Chromebooks, etc., but also the social emotional needs.
I did virtual last school year. My COVID year was really bad. I suffered from bad depression. I got social anxiety. It was just really nerve-wracking.
Students don't have an efficient working environment when they live in low-income households. They are more likely to not have nutritious meals, considering that some students rely on free or reduced lunch for school.
Most of our kids in underserved communities, they counted on school lunch and breakfast. And during the pandemic, some of them went hungry.
When it comes to my education, COVID harmed me because my grades went down. I wasn't paying attention to school that much. My house is very loud, and I didn't really have much people helping me during virtual.
But what we are seeing with kids who have recently enrolled in our program is that they are behind.
In terms of college enrollment, both at your traditional four-year institutions, your community colleges, is that there are lower enrollments this year across the board, but more so for Black and brown students. So when you talk about higher education, they're being impacted, more severely at that level as well. And to see that higher education gap increase as well.
Some schools don't have a holistic review process. Some have a review process that is much more formulaic and look at much more specifically the numbers in the process to make their admission decisions. The reality is that using test scores makes it easier for us to make admission decisions.
I think your circumstances do dictate to some degree what you may end up pursuing after you graduate high school. So I'm not sure that COVID has impacted students of color differently than it has their white peers.
I think what COVID has done has both put a spotlight on this disparity with opportunities, but also what has happened, it has accelerated it.
COVID has helped exacerbate differences in inequality in our society like no other time in our history.
It's just a matter of politicians and folks having the guts to do what is just